Hello, it is another Tuesday, which of course means it's time for another in real life video. And although most weeks we usually take a request from a general viewer such as you, which you can still feel free to submit a question or a request for me to rank something silly, helps a bunch if when you leave a comment you include a question mark. But regardless, this week we aren't doing that. In fact, this week we're actually doing something extremely topical. So topical that years from now, even a year from now, it will be completely irrelevant, right? But at the very least, I think it's very fun to sort of have a timeline of events leading up to things. And also, it'll be fun to look back on it when everyone kind of ever so slightly lost their minds. Which, of course, brings us to our topic. That being the mysterious statue which appeared in the middle of a desert. Not exactly in the middle of the desert, off of a road in the Mojave Desert, at the California part, I believe, of the Mojave Desert. But regardless, a mysterious statue appeared there. Geoff Keighley is the one who first teased it because, of course, it's going to be involved heavily at, well, not heavily, but it's going to feature in some way at the Game Awards this year, and we're going to find out what the big hubbub is truly all about. But nonetheless, he put out a bit of a teaser on, I think, Twitter, and he included 3 mysterious words which people deduce to be, God, what is it? What 3 words? What it was? Some people somehow deduce that those 3 words correlated to coordinates on this something or other. I don't know. Called What 3 Words? I think it's called that. Correct me if I'm wrong. But they went and plugged it in there and brought up the rest of this statue. And it also included, you could find it on a map. So some people went out there. Folks went out there and took a look at the statue. There was at least 1 or 2 video recordings that at this point, let me just suffice it to say, the situation with the statue has spun so far out of control and then summarily also chilled the hell out. But there was like a day or 2 where it was rapidly spiraling out of control with people speculating that I tried to look up sources and stuff for all of these images and videos and whatnot. But aside from like forum posts and stuff, like I have no idea who originally recorded these. So my apologies for not like doing proper citation, right? This is, think of this as being incredibly informal because it is. It seems very difficult to track down exactly who was the point of origination for some of these. So I give up. I'm not going to try. Regardless, people went out there and recorded and looked at it and all that good stuff. Now, immediately the question is, what is the game, right? What game is this teasing? There's going to be some sort of announcement. What could it be? Obviously, people are thirsty for Elder Scrolls 6. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. They're like, oh, after such and such many years it's been, I'm no longer interested in the Elder Scrolls 6. Oh, I didn't really care for Starfield, so I've given up all hope. Shut up, man. Shut up. People are still freaking the hell out. Dude, if anything has come from this, it is that the temperature, we're still at a boiling point when it comes to Elder Scrolls 6 hype. People are ready to go absolutely haywire. This is what years and years of no new game does to a fandom. And it's this, wild speculation, people losing their minds, myself included. Now, at first, when I personally saw it, personal anecdote, personal story, when I first saw the statue, I was like, nah, it couldn't be. It couldn't be Elder Scrolls 6. It couldn't be. There's no way. We already heard just recently from Todd Howard himself that Elder Scrolls 6 is still a while away, right? It's still a ways out. And also, the statue, it barely looks like anything from Elder Scrolls, right? Sure, it's generic fantasy enough to where it could plausibly fit within Elder Scrolls, but it would demand such a huge change of aesthetics from Skyrim to whatever Elder Scrolls 6 is going to be called. You know, it would demand such an enormous change of aesthetics. And then things started happening. There's a brief window of time of about 24-hour period, roughly, where things got really wild. Things got really... speculation was running amok. There was stuff where corden, I believe it was, of various Xbox and Windows related publications and audio podcasts, maybe video podcasts too, came out and said, oh, this is for Diablo 4 and it's an expansion, right? And a lot of people were like, is it true? In the past, corden has had kind of, when it comes to being an insider and sort of someone who leaks information, as it were, corden has had kind of a hit and miss track record. He's not like a top tier person when it comes to this. He's not like creme de la creme. He's not always hitting on all sixes. And this, I think, as we'll eventually get to, further proves out the point. but the way in which this all plays out is so wild, honestly. Now that I think of it. But regardless, he says it's for Diablo 4. It's for a Diablo 4 expansion, which, fair enough. There is some stuff in Diablo 4 that does look vaguely like this, right? Some sort of like calcified, petrified looking entities along like a wall or a door frame or a gateway or something like that. But some folks brought up to challenge that, like, maybe corden is incorrect here, right? Maybe it's something else, right? Maybe it's not Diablo. And folks got to really studying this statue. There were some people who did this sort of like really ridiculous and over the top stuff of like looking at pictures of bears in Skyrim and mounted bears, like taxidermy in Skyrim, and sort of drawing little like green and yellow and red lines all over those, and then doing the same with the bears, or the werebears, which is another point of contention, is that they do appear to be werebears. Which, mind you, both Diablo 4 and Elder Scrolls have werebears, or werewolves if you want to say it's a werewolf. Which I think there is also a werewolf present in the statue. But regardless, it's pretty plausible that it could have been Diablo 4. But people were still bringing up points of like, well, there's other things that seem Elder Scrollsy, right? How about the fact that it's in a desert? Diablo also features deserts, right? Diablo is like famous for having desert landscapes in an act or two of Diablos since the beginning of Diablo 1, right? Well, actually, that's not true. At least Diablo 2. At least Diablo 2. Regardless, it's set up in a desert, right? The desert landscape seems somewhat relevant to what's going on here. And people were factoring that in. There seemed to be like a big snake, a giant snake-like creature sort of wrapped around it, which people said, hey, maybe that's tied to some Hammerfell / Redguard / Yakuden lore, right? There's like a bird being that could be like a bird god. I actually know very little about like this sort of Hammerfell like Redguard lore. I know very little about it. I remember like the tall papa, the white snake and stuff like that. It gets really wild. You know, in true Elder Scrolls fashion, the lore that you dig deep enough, it starts to sound very weird and esoteric and strange and otherworldly. It's fun. That's why we like it, right? But that's no different here. People were starting to connect dots in either more plausible ways like that, less plausible ways by virtue of like looking at at pictures of bears and saying like, this looks like an Elder Scrolls bear. Dog, it looks like a bear. It looks like a bear, right? There were like undead monsters and stuff on it, and you know, it could be anything, right? I think the biggest point that I internally started to arrive at once we got to this next stage, which I guess we'll hold off on. The next big piece of news eventually dropped, wherein it was Jason Schreier, as well as Corey Barlog, as well as someone else on the Reset Era forums, who in the past had some degree of being vetted as like being good for it. But Corey Barlog, famously of the new God of War games, the 2 new ones, a lot of people had been having ideas that, oh, the next one will be maybe ancient Egypt. You know, ancient Egyptian mythology will be where Kratos goes to do murder or whatever. Which, true enough, you know, there's some stuff in there, right? I mean, Lord knows there is some connective tissue between ancient Egyptian mythos and mythos present in Elder Scrolls, in particular, the mythos surrounding Hammerfell, surrounding Redguard religion and all of that, right? There is connective tissue there. So it stands to reason, well, it could be either of these. But Corey Barlog went out of his way to say that it's not GOW, which immediately upon then, a lot of people were like, oh, it's not God of War. Unless he's trying to be a little tricky, and this guy's actually saying Gears of War. Because also in the past, Corey has been a little bit of a fun tease about stuff like this and done a little bit of like joking around, pretending to not know things when he does know things, like, you know, just throwing the wool over people's eyes in a fun way. So maybe this was it again. But this other person crops up on Reset Era and says, well, that doesn't strike me as being anything familiar with what I know is happening at Sony Santa Monica Studios. You know, I know some about what's going on there, and this doesn't corroborate, this doesn't correlate to what I know of. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm an idiot, but it doesn't match up to me. So that extra source coming in and saying that, I feel like was enough to put a hamper on it. Mind you, there's always the chance that we have an unreliable narrator. Either intentionally they're being duplicitous, or someone who maybe just got it incorrect, you know? That is true all the way down, all the way across any of these potential sources and people coming in with information, right? That works either way. Regardless, suddenly, God of War is ruled out, which was one of the 3 big ones that people were figuring this statue to be. That being God of War, Diablo 4 expansion, which, you know, next year, assuming the timeline works out, right, and there's no major delay, there should be a big expansion for Diablo 4 next year in 2026, right? Vessel of Hatred would have been, 2 years ago? So it makes sense. Maybe some teasing early on about it. The timeline works out. That's what I said to myself, honestly. But then, of course, the other third one that's major is Elder Scrolls 6. And the more you look at the statue, the more there's stuff on it that looks like it could be. Like, I mean, for God's sakes, there's a crocodile-looking guy. There's an alligator guy. It literally looks like a Gordon, a Daedroth, as they appear in Oblivion. Mind you, as well, in ancient Egyptian mythos, right? Dudes who look like alligators and crocodiles and stuff, that happens, you know, it's not unique to Elder Scrolls. And there are other parts of it that seemed a little odd, and that is the way in which the sort of undead or demons or whatever they were present on that statue. A lot of them featuring like heavy horns, you know, they almost remind me of like Dragon Age looking horns, which maybe that's a hint at something, you know, maybe it has to do with Dragon Age in some weird way, right? But, you know, like big sets of horns where they like crop way out and up on a few of them. And the undead, some of them actually looking like Falmer, I would say, in some respects. But it could be anything, right? It could be anything. People were taking close looks at some of the scaling, some of the points of articulation on the armor for some of the figures on the statue, because some folks were like, well, it looks kind of like it could be Blade's armor. It looks like it could be some Imperial Legion armor. But the problem is that Elder Scrolls takes a lot of inspiration from real life stuff, right? That's one of the main features that we love about the Elder Scrolls, is when it does borrow from real life mythos and kind of pops it all in a blender, and then out comes some fun new treat, ideally. Thus, it could be anything. It could be anything because it's based off of real life stuff. There's no clear sign as to what exactly is going on. At least the only thing we know is that in some way this is being mindful of some amount of real world mythos and real world like armor making and creatures and stuff from real world mythos, you know? Then another shoe drop. Jason Schreier came out and said, I don't know what Jez Corden's talking about, but it's not Diablo. I'm not going to tell you what it is. Jason alluding to the fact that he definitely knows. Jason Schreier says it's not a Diablo 4 expansion, which I think is maybe one of the more wild things that came out of this is Jason Schreier just coming out of the damn woodwork and immediately like suplexing Jez Corden onto the asphalt. Like, that was wild to just that is so wild. All right, for those who do not know, we went over a little bit of the reputation of Jez Corden, but Jason Schreier is like the complete opposite of that. Within our wheelhouse, where we sort of on this channel, we definitely have a keen eye for Bethesda Game Studios video games and IP, as it were. We want to get really like corporate about it. Jason Schreier is the guy who leaked Fallout 4. He leaked the opening script to the damn game. Stuff that he leaked in that 100% appeared in the game. He blew that story like I don't know. he blew the lid off of that story. It was so wild how much he was talking. It was wild. There was so much, and mind you, this was a situation not unlike what's going on here, wherein there were years of people sort of speculating wildly about Fallout 4. There were so many fake websites made of people trying to be like, this is Fallout 4, but it wasn't really, right? That shit was going around. It's happening again, and this time it's probably even worse because the distance of time is even longer as it was relative to like Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. But yeah, maybe the biggest takeaway for me personally is the fact that Jason Schreier just so immediately was like ready to shut that shit down when it came to Jez Corden, which I don't know. Is Jez Corden bad? He seems like, sure enough, I don't really like, especially now, like I said, this is the big takeaway, is like whenever Jez Corden says like he has some insider information, I'm going to take that with like a pickup truck full of salt. You know, I ain't trusting this dude and any of what he's got to say when it comes to stuff like that. But he seems like an amicable enough and nice person, you know? But it was, like I said, it was just so wild to see it and witness it. And that's probably the main takeaway for me. But regardless, Jason Schreier came out of the woodwork and said, oh, it's not Diablo. So we have some trusted sources saying it's not Diablo 4 expansion. It's not GOW. It's not something being worked on at Sony Santa Monica. Which means the other big one is Elder Scrolls, right? Is Elder Scrolls 6. My God. And this is when it reached a fever pitch. And this is when I saw that happen, Jason Schreier say, it's not Diablo. I lost my fucking shit, dude. I went buck wild. I was freaking out. You can ask my partner. I was like going absolutely wild, thinking like, oh my God, this is it. This is it. This is the big one. This is the big one. They're actually doing it, right? They said it wasn't coming along, but they're pulling a Fallout 4, wherein, you know, sort of infamously, as people have tracked, there was a point in time where roughly a year before the launch of Fallout 4, or was it the announcement? I think it was the launch of it. Todd Howard got out and said, oh, it's still a long ways away. You know, it's still a long ways away. And then come to find out, it's about a year away, right? If you look back at that time period, which a lot of people now famously love to bring up and all that. Truly buck wild. And a lot of people digging up like various statues that maybe look similar in Elder Scrolls Online, you know, that being a statue dedicated to Vermina, and a lot of people were digging up, oh, there's this flower sort of in Hammerfell / Redguard culture that is associated with some Daedric princes and stuff going on like that. This flower that was used in sort of a hallucinogenic way. Oh, you could kind of connect the dots. Hallucinations to Vermina being sort of like this Daedric prince that presides over dreams and nightmares. Dreams and nightmares would also explain maybe why some of the creatures featured on this look particularly hellish and nightmarish, right? Why they look particularly scary. Because if we're dealing with Vermina as being like a big threat in like a major antagonistic force in Elder Scrolls 6, it makes sense. Why wouldn't you dial up the horror factor a little bit? Bethesda historically has liked to toy around with getting shit a little scary in their games every now and then. Plus, I sort of reflected on it myself, as I was about to say before. When it comes to one of my big arguments against it not being Elder Scrolls was originally saying like, well, the aesthetic is too different. And then I realized, oh my God, I'm the dumbest man alive. Dog, the Elder Scrolls, the mainline games, they changed the aesthetics of those games so fucking much, right? Even just the 3 most recent mainline games have completely different vibes and aesthetics and art styles, you know? Maybe you could make a point that Morrowind and Skyrim have sort of like a similar vibe and aesthetic, but even then, I think you could find no shortage of people arguing that they're very different, right? But frankly, look at the jump to Oblivion and back from and away from it. It is wild. It could be anything. One of the other points is that Jason Schreier went out of his way to say it's a big one, right? This is a big one. It's going to be a big surprise. It's alluding to like this is going to be a big treat. It's from an established IP, I believe was said, but it's so different that like it is from a pre-existing series of games, but this one is so different that it may as well feel like a completely different game, you know? Which, true enough, if you want to cling to that, you could say in Elder Scrolls, so many different Elder Scrolls games have their own sort of vibe. They have their own sort of feeling. They each have their own sort of soul, as it were, where each game has this very different feel. You could totally lean into that. But yeah, people were looking at all this stuff, comparing, saying like, oh, well, it is plausible that this statue in Elder Scrolls Online doesn't look exactly like this statue. But what if it's an amalgamation of things? Because of course there's hundreds of years of difference in time between ESO and between what's going on. Maybe this is Vermina. Who knows? There's so many different factors at play. It's entirely plausible. Well, today, plausibility has allegedly come to its end, wherein Jason Schreier stepped out and said that he wasn't planning on doing it again, but people were getting a little too wild, I guess, and he said it is not related to the Elder Scrolls 6. It is not Elder Scrolls 6 related whatsoever. And thus, I feel, comes the end of the arc. True enough, there are still people who are clinging to the dream, who are clinging to hope and saying, well, Jason Schreier, you know, he's just trying to throw us off. There's been all this stuff, all this talk in games media and sort of like games discourse spheres wherein, well, is it kind of good to have surprises? Do we really want to spoil every single surprise by virtue of like it getting leaked out or whatever? Are we in some ways doing a disservice to the buildup of the surprise by leaking things out? So of course he's going to try and throw people off the trail, you know? This sort of ideas has recently come into the sphere of thought that everyone's sort of engaged with or whatever. Just as well, people saying that, well, maybe Jason Schreier doesn't know what he's talking about, which I think is maybe the least likely. I think if you really want to go that route, I would more so believe that he's being duplicitous. But even then, I don't think so. Or you could say that he's being, he's telling the truth, but sort of through, or he's lying through omission in that I've seen some folks posit that, oh, maybe this is an expansion for Oblivion Remastered, which would be a little wild, would be a little a little bit of a wild one to tend to. And maybe it's true. Maybe it is an expansion for Oblivion Remastered, which I feel like would come out of nowhere, but frankly, wouldn't be a terrible idea. I don't know how I feel about it, but as far as a business decision, making an expansion for Oblivion Remastered, it would probably really sell, right? It's something that nobody would have expected, because what everyone is expecting is them to next and immediately roll into Fallout 3 Remastered. I don't know if I would be down for it more holistically, because I wasn't really too keen on some of the the writing and everything that they had for the new stuff present in Oblivion Remastered, right? The little 2 digital deluxe quests and all of that. But granted, you know, how much do you get to show off there? How much are they going to involve BGS for it? Who can say? Who could say? Regardless, all of that is scuttlebutt. It is probably something else, because an expansion for Oblivion Remastered, I don't know if that would qualify as a big deal or something, or whatever Jason said. Sorry, I shouldn't have used air quotes because I don't remember exactly his wording. But I don't know if that qualifies as being that amazing, that big of a deal for any of it. Which it got me to wondering, what the hell would it even be? If not those 3 things, what would it even be? Would it be? Is it possible it could be something from Software? I guess that's true. It could be. They definitely have a lot of pre-established IP and all of that. It could be something from like their back catalog, right? They might Dark Souls 4 might come out of nowhere. Demon Souls, right? A lot of demonic looking things in From Software games. There could be like an Elden Ring sequel. Could be the new Sekiro, which would make sense, that there would be a statue in the United States of all places. Because for all of these, if it's like in-house From Software, do they have a track record of putting out big statues in the middle of deserts in the United States of America? I don't know about that. What would make sense is if it were Sekiro, because the owners of that IP were Activision, right? Thus transfer that over. It's now Microsoft, you know? It makes sense. But also makes sense in the same way that, like, well, Bethesda Game Studios were also, and Microsoft as a whole, had some measure of presence in the Mojave Wasteland, the Mojave Desert in real life just recently, on account of the celebration for Fallout New Vegas, which recently popped off, and did have some of their staff out there, which could have been a good cover, you know? But suffice it to say, nobody seems to have really any good idea as to what it could be now. It's really achieved what a work of marketing genius, right? Leading into this, especially with regards to how many games are ready to spiral out of control for people getting overly excited about them, right? That being either God of War or Elder Scrolls 6, or in some ways Diablo 4 expansion. I've seen other people bring up the a few other games like Ashes of Creation, which, you know, I think that's a little wild. Like, that goes against the grain with some of the other things we know, it being kind of a big deal potentially in a pre-established IP. I've seen people bring up House Marquis' new game, Saros, which does have some like desert theming going on, but it's very sci-fi. And House Marquis is cool, and Returnal was cool, but I don't know if that qualifies as being that big of a deal. So I don't know what we're talking about here. It could be something to do with like CD Projekt Red. It could be. CD Projekt Red does like doing wild things like that, but as far as we know, next up for them is another Witcher game. They're going to do a Witcher trilogy, ideally, and they're going to do more Cyberpunk, right? Is it possible that there's going to be a third something or other that they work on? I don't know. I feel like From Software now is like at the top of the list of what it could be related to. I don't know. Who could say? Either way, it's going to be a big one, right? It's probably not going to be Elder Scrolls. I really don't think it's going to be an Oblivion expansion. That just seems too out of left field. That's too wild. But who knows? Maybe. Maybe we'll be surprised. But shit, at the end of the day, maybe it could still be Elder Scrolls 6. I mean, it could be. It could be. I really don't think so now. Shit, who could say? We were really giving Half-Life 3 believers a run for their money for like a day or two, right? Shit just reached a fever pitch for a hot minute in a lot of big-time Elder Scrolls lovers spaces, right? It went absolutely wild, myself included, and I started out as a doubter. But then I channeled the fucking Fox Mulder within me, and I wanted to believe. I wanted to believe that shit. But now I'm no longer a believer. But I'm so eager to just find out what it is. It'll be so funny if it's something that doesn't pan out. Nobody like knows or gets what the hell all the hype was about, right? Either way, It'll be something that people look back on and are like, man, the best thing that this studio did was actually their marketing, right? That would be wild. That would be so wild. Anyway, that'll do it for this week. Like I said, this is a very topical one. But man, what fun. Get ready for more fake Elder Scrolls leaks and stuff like this. It's going to keep happening. I hope it keeps happening. It's fun. It's very fun. I didn't think I would enjoy getting into as much as I did, but shoot. So inside you are two FBI agents. one is Fox Mulder and the other is Dana Scully. Every time one of these hit, who are you going to embrace? You must make a decision. Are you going more Scully or are you going more Mulder for it? And let me tell you, I think I want to try and go Mulder every damn time. Right? What a way to live. What a way to live life on the edge of your damn seat when anything could pop off. All right, that ought to do it for this week. Until next time, please take care of each other.